Why welfare promises end in guarantee future wars. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep into a provocative idea that's been simmering in political economy for a long time. We're talking about how systems of mass democracy, when paired with expansive welfare programs like pensions and healthcare, alongside the use of fiat currency, don't just strain societies, they logically steer them toward conflict and war as the ultimate escape hatch. This isn't some wild speculation. It's the endpoint of incentives that compound over decades. Let's unpack it step by step. Picture this: a society where the illusion of collective self-rule masks a deeper reality. People believe they're sovereign, but in practice, the game rewards those who promise the most from the public purse. That's the setup we're exploring today. The hidden mechanics that turn good intentions into unsustainable pressure, eroding property, inflating away savings, and eventually demanding a dramatic reset. Stick around because by the end, the path to war as the final consequence will feel less like doom-mongering and more like cold, unavoidable logic. If this episode challenged how you see governance, incentives, and the future, hit like, share it with those who value deep reasoning over comforting illusions, subscribe for more unfiltered explorations, and drop a comment with your strongest counter or supporting thought. Your engagement keeps these conversations alive. Let's get into the heart of it. In a democracy where the masses are told they hold the power, the real dynamic is whoever can promise the largest share of redistributed wealth wins the most support. This isn't true sovereignty. It's a competition in bribery funded by someone else's resources. Politicians, acting as self-interested actors, don't campaign on hard truths like limits or restraint. They campaign on benefits. Generous pensions for the elderly, comprehensive healthcare for all, subsidies here, transfers there. Each promise builds a dependent bloc that votes to protect its gains. The welfare apparatus expands because concentrated groups, bureaucrats managing the programs, recipients drawing from them, lobby intensely, while the costs are spread thinly across taxpayers and future generations. This creates a ratchet effect. Once a pension system or healthcare entitlement is in place, scaling it back invites backlash from voters who feel entitled to what was promised. Rational ignorance plays a role too. Most individuals don't invest time calculating their net burden because one vote feels insignificant. So the system grows, feeding endless bureaucracy that justifies its existence by inventing new vulnerabilities to protect. Fiat currency supercharges this. Without the hard discipline of a commodity-backed money, governments can print or borrow to bridge the gap between promises and revenue. Deficits balloon, debt piles up, and inflation quietly robs savers and wage earners of their purchasing power. It's a hidden tax that funds the welfare machine without immediate revolt. But this deferral can't last forever. Demographics shift. More retirees, fewer workers, and the math turns ugly. Pensions become underfunded, healthcare queues lengthen, and the productive base feels squeezed. Now, counterarguments often surface here, claiming some systems balance this with flexibility or cultural factors. But let's dismantle them logically. One common pushback is that welfare states foster stability by reducing inequality and preventing unrest. Yet if stability relies on ever-increasing extraction from producers to fund non-producers, it undermines the very incentives for production. Over time, work, saving, and investment decline as people shift toward seeking state favors instead of creating value. This isn't balance, it's slow erosion disguised as compassion. The logic fails because it ignores time preferences. Short-term relief creates long-term dependency, making reform politically suicidal. Another objection: democracies self-correct through elections, allowing voters to choose restraint when debts mount. But this overlooks the incentive structure. Incumbents and challengers both compete in the same promise auction. Cutting entitlements alienates core voting blocks, while printing more money or raising taxes on the wealthy or outsiders wins applause. Voters, facing diffuse personal costs but concentrated personal benefits, rationally support expansion. The median voter theorem in action doesn't lead to equilibrium at sustainability. It drifts toward more redistribution because that's where the votes cluster. Authority-oriented voices calling for limits get painted as heartless, while the cycle deepens. Critics might point to innovation and growth masking problems for years. True, free markets generate wealth that welfare systems siphon. But this is parasitic, not symbiotic. As the welfare burden grows, marginal tax rates rise, regulations multiply to control abuses, and speech gets restricted under pretexts of protecting the vulnerable or maintaining cohesion. Questioning the system's fairness becomes dangerous. Divide and rule tactics emerge, pitting groups against each other to maintain coalitions. The illusion of power persists. People vote, they feel sovereign, but real control slips away as debt compounds and fiat devalues their stake. When the breaking point nears, unsustainable entitlements, crushing interest payments, stagnant productivity, the sovereign masses confront shattered expectations. They've been told the system serves the common good, yet it delivers dependency and erosion. In response, frustration boils over not as constructive reform but as scattered revenge against society. Random acts of defiance, scapegoating neighbors, or demands for even more extraction. The state, facing its own illegitimacy, doubles down with propaganda, claiming more controls are needed for the greater good. Property rights, the foundation of any legitimate order, get subordinated to collective claims. Instead of protecting what individuals create, the state reallocates it, breeding resentment. This is where war enters as the logical consequence. A system built on electing short-term opportunists who fund promises by robbing Peter to pay Paul reaches exhaustion. Reform means admitting the theft and facing judgment from a betrayed public. Elites and politicians, having enriched themselves or their networks through the bureaucracy, prefer external conflict. War resets the board. It justifies massive new spending, unifies factions against a common enemy, inflates away debt through money creation, and distracts from internal failures. Destruction clears inventories, new contracts flow, and the cycle can restart under fresh pretexts of protection and sacrifice. History shows Fiat-enabled states lean into this when domestic pressures peak. It's not coincidence. It's incentive alignment. The state always frames aggression as defending the vulnerable or advancing the common good, further entrenching the injustice. Themes here revolve around incentives over intentions. Democracy masquerades as rule by the people but functions as rule by the best promisers. Welfare programs, noble on paper, create moral hazards. They discourage personal responsibility, inflate time horizons toward the present, and expand government into every life corner. Fiat currency removes the natural break, allowing exponential growth in extraction. Together, they foster tyranny through softness, gradual restrictions, dependency, and propaganda, until the structure cracks. The core injustice? Violating private property, the only true basis for a state's existence. Without secure ownership, voluntary exchange collapses, and coercion fills the void. A thinker once captured it sharply. In systems where rulers treat the state as temporary caretakers rather than stewards with skin in the long game, they maximize current extraction at the expense of future value. Monopolies on decision-making plus majority appeals accelerate this. Another insight: unlimited majorities impose costs on minorities without restraint, leading to cycles of plunder that demand resets. These observations hold because they derive from human action, self-interest operating under perverse rules, not utopian assumptions about benevolent planners. In the end, the path forward isn't patching this machine but recognizing its flaws. Societies thrive when property is sacrosanct, choices are voluntary, and government stays limited to protection rather than provision. Embrace free market principles where value creation, not redistribution, drives progress. Decentralize power, allow experimentation in smaller units, and reject the illusion that voting legitimizes theft. The alternative, continuing the welfare fiat democracy triad, guarantees escalating tension ending in conflict. Thanks for joining me on this exploration. Reflect on these incentives in your own life and circles. Challenge the promises that sound too good. Until next time, stay sharp and think critically.